It's a great day. You're hired. You are now the CEO of ABC Dynamics Corporation. You know you're perfect for this role, and the owners do as well. Everyone is stoked. You start in a few weeks, and there's much to get done. A family relocation, a 90-day action plan, more studying on the company, markets, competition. You're already digging in. Hi, I'm Phil Coerper, Managing Director of Ringling Business Solutions. In this episode of the CEO's Field Manual, we'll discuss the most important thing you, as a newly hired CEO, must accomplish right out of the gate. No, it's not learning, onboarding, strategy, or quote-unquote hitting the ground running, although these things are obviously important. The most critical thing you must address as a new CEO is building your team, both your executive leadership team and your inner circle. Because if you miss on these, no amazing strategy or execution brilliance will lead to long-term winning. I've lived this issue in many situations. I've done it well, and I've missed dramatically, leading to months and sometimes years of challenges and rework. Get this right, and you're ready to rock and roll. Miss, and you'll waste countless hours rebuilding the team and cleaning up problems of misalignment, lack of cohesiveness, and worst of all, undercutting the confidence in you and the other leaders who are tasked with driving change and success. Let's hit some real-world examples. I've just been named the president of a family-owned business. The only active family member is the CEO of the overall family corporate holdings, so I'm effectively running the company. Accountability and authority align, with the exception of one area, and that's the executive team. My direct reports are long-term incumbents at the firm and have long-lasting ties to the company and the owner. Now, they are for the most part talented and dedicated to the success of the company. And to be honest, the fact the owner had loyalty to this team was revealed in the interview process. I can't claim I was surprised. What I can say is I completely underestimated how having to utilize the existing leadership team as my team would impact our ability to drive change and success. In one case, I learned the painful lesson that tolerating someone who doesn't belong costs you 10 times more than the discomfort of removing them quickly. Craig was the operations manager at the company. Now, this was a small town, and Craig was well established in the community. But as it turned out, he was not a high-character person. He was a solid operational manager and had been at the company almost forever, so it was overlooked that his standards were often not what I would demand from my executive team. In one case, Craig actually propositioned a female team member. Now, this happened before I was hired and was, let's say, swept under the rug. As I got to know Craig, I observed several concerning behavior traits. He sometimes went missing unexpectedly for hours at a time. He avoided providing direct answers, and his team was very hesitant to engage openly. In other situations that I've been in, this would have not been a hard call. Someone like this, I would have let go post-haste. But in this case, it took an agonizing time frame to get him off my team. It ended as expected, but what a lesson learned from the wasted time and energy managing a team member who did not belong. I learned a hard lesson. Authority for hire and fire on your executive team is paramount. Make sure you discuss the hiring and firing approval process in the final interviews. One other key point here. Ask this question: is anyone untouchable? In Ted's family business, in the last episode, the answer was I needed to get approval to impact any family member. And one executive who had been with the company from the onset was literally untouchable. Other than that, it was my team to build. I knew where I stood, so eyes open, which is the most important thing. One caveat here, just because I had full authority to hire, I still included active board members or key family members in the process, specifically if it was a key role. They should have voice and provide advice, and also you gain alignment. You should just have the final say. A second example, I just accepted the CEO position for a PE-sponsored company. What was unique is that the previous CEO had allowed his leadership team to be remotely located literally all over the country. Now, he happened to work in Baltimore, where there was no company facility anywhere near. I was relocating to the largest facility that would become our corporate headquarters. The only executive working out of that facility was the VP of sales. I signed up for a total rebuild of the executive team. Now, this may be counterintuitive, but I saw that as a feature of the job, not a defect. I could hire my team. One of the challenges to building my leadership team was this was also small town USA. Top executive talent, and most importantly, their spouses, may be reluctant to relocate to this area. One quick side point here. Executives will often say in an interview they are open to relocation. You need to personally hear that from the spouse before you buy it. If I had a nickel for every executive who backed out of a job after their spouse ultimately could not accept a relocation, well, you get the drift. Another related story. It's one of my first few weeks on the job. I'm making the rounds, this time in operations. I stopped into the plant's HR department and sit at the desk of Stacy, the HR manager for the plant. Stacy was clearly a working class woman. She was very casually dressed, presenting more like a lead on the plant floor than the HR manager. But she immediately came off as an honest, down-to-earth, and very smart person. I was sitting across from her at her desk in an open office environment. She was fearless and brutally honest on what we were doing well, where we were missing the boat, how the employees viewed the leadership at the company, including perceptions of me, who was coming there to lead the firm. As I walked back to my office, I was ecstatic. I found my corporate VP of HR. To an earlier point, I did not have to check with anyone on this. Stacy was my pick, and it turned out to be one of the best promotions I ever made. So let's go up a few thousand feet and discuss some bigger picture items on building out your team as the CEO. The core things most CEOs demand when selecting executives is honesty, competence, dedication, things like that. The key question is, how do I know these folks are right for my team? Some CEOs answer this question with an assessment of loyalty. Now that sounds logical, but think about it. Loyalty can be great or can be toxic. We need executive team members that intellectually challenge what we are doing. So here's what I think is the key. I add team members to my executive leadership team on 3 core attributes. First, they put team success ahead of individual success. You may be surprised this eliminates many highly capable candidates. I was interviewing a potential VP of sales. She had often cited teamwork and mentoring as key attributes. When I asked for examples of her proudest achievements, one response was the first time she was promoted to an executive level position. Well, where's the teamwork or mentoring in that, I thought. Secondly, my leadership team members must be hands-on, relentless workers. Now, most of my roles have been in mid-market size companies where everyone has to be more hands-on engaged. But even in larger enterprises, folks that see their role as managing others are often overhead rather than value creators, in my opinion. I've had executives who saw their role like this, managing others to get work done rather than doing the work. Now, of course, you need to leverage your resources, and you must be a force multiplier by engaging your team and getting everybody pulling the rope. But if you are not determined to get your hands dirty, you're going to have trouble on a team that I'm leading because everybody else will. One way to bring this out is to ask for very specific responses in the interview process. One time I was interviewing for a president position. It was a team interview with several executives attending. The owner asked me to stand up and draw out the organizational chart from my last job on the whiteboard. He then wanted me to describe in detail what each executive did and how I measured their success. I thought this was brilliant. It tested how I was on my feet, how I was at communicating before a group, and how detailed I was in my management style. I've plagiarized a version of this often when interviewing. And third, leaders on my executive team must be laser focused on delivering results. A mentor of mine once gave me great advice on this. Now, Joe was the CEO of our parent company. At that point in my career, I was a business unit manager. I worked for a division president who worked for Joe. We were in his office providing an update on several large projects we were trying to land. My update gave him status, next steps like a meeting with a key customer, percent close, timing. What it lacked was, how did I intend on closing these orders? He stopped me mid-sentence and said, "Phil, don't confuse traveling with arriving." Can you think of a better way to describe a relentless focus on outcomes and results? I had moved on from the company where I had promoted Stacy to the role of VP HR. We caught up on a Zoom call. She looked great, professional, completely buttoned down as a senior executive. She had just accepted the role as senior VP at a multinational corporation, and I could have not been prouder or more impressed. There are many highly impactful things you do as an executive, but identifying folks with great upside and mentoring them to achieve it is, in my view, the most important and impactful thing we do as leaders. Thanks for watching this episode of the CEO's Field Manual. Next week takes us to Russia, where I was presented with a deal that would have made everyone rich, and then likely sent all of us to jail. Thanks, everybody. Please subscribe, and we'll see you at a future video.